The Freedom Junkies presents Breaking Free. I'm Ems Rickson, and this is Breaking Free, the podcast where I talk honestly about addiction, how it has affected me, and the things I do to break free, in the hope it will help others who want to do the same.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Free. In this episode, I'm going to talk about clutter and how tidying up can help improve your mental health. I think that maybe I'm inspired by this very unseasonal, springy kind of weather that we've been having in Berlin in the last week. It's been so glorious, and it's really made me feel like I want to clear out the van and clean everything and get really organized. I've been doing the same thing at the cafe that I work at. I have to admit, I have also been watching Tidying Up with Marie Kondo pretty obsessively, and it feels like it's been slightly life-changing. I'm telling everyone I know to watch the show and to do what she says because I feel like she's a genius. So I thought that I would have a think about what clutter is and why it is that it accumulates in our lives, and what kind of effect it can have on our mental health when it builds up. Have a little look at some methods and ideas of how you can combat clutter in your life, and then the benefits that we can all experience from having a good clear out. I also just wanted to add that not everybody is the same. So if you're not one of those people that feels like you're stressed when you're in a messy room, or that you're not comfortable, you find it hard to relax when you're surrounded by clutter, then maybe it's not an issue for you. Not everybody's brains work in the same way. But if you do feel like you're stressed when you get home, or that you can't relax when you're in your own space, having a look at the clutter, or if there's room for you to tidy up there, could really help you a lot. Because one of the things about clutter is that we don't necessarily always notice that it's there, and we don't always realize the effect that it can be having on our mental health. So, first of all, what is clutter? So, one of the things to remember is that clutter's not always physical. It's not always just loads of stuff that's built up in your house. It can also be mental clutter, it can be emotional clutter, and also digital clutter was one category of clutter that I thought was really interesting and definitely relevant for a lot of people and the way that we live our lives. So that's something that I want to look at as well. So why is it that we accumulate these things? Some of the things that I found were really interesting. In our brains, we have areas that are associated with conflict and with pain. And those areas overreact when you try to let go of a possession that you are emotionally attached to. And the stronger the emotional attachment, the stronger the overreaction. So you're actually experiencing conflict and pain when you try to get rid of things, which makes it difficult, which is why we tend not to do it. Another thing that happens in our brain, we have these two different forces that interact. One of them is the endowment effect. So this is a phenomenon that means that we place a higher value on objects that we own than on identical objects that we don't own. So we are more attached to our belongings than just to things that don't belong to us. The other force is loss aversion. So we prefer to avoid the pain of loss more than the benefit of gaining something. So the fear of loss and the value that we place on things that we own mean that we keep acquiring objects and we don't like to get rid of them. So we acquire and then they accumulate. And this creates a lot of clutter in our lives. So the reason that clutter can cause stress and anxiety is that it creates a lot of visual stimulation. And that visual stimulation causes an increase in cortisol in your brain. It's been shown that this increase in cortisol is actually higher for women than it is for men. But apparently everybody experiences these increased levels of cortisol, which is a hormone that can lead to a lot of health problems when you constantly are experiencing high levels of it. The reason that it's stressful is that clutter drains your time. You know, we spend a lot of time looking for things when we don't know where they are, and when there's a lot of stuff around that we have to search through all the time to find things. It can lead to a loss of money. For example, if you don't have your financial papers in order, if you're constantly always having to pay more because you've missed bills or you've misplaced fines. Also, if you're having to keep buying new things because you keep losing the old things, then that can create problems with money, which can lead to more stress. Also, clutter is a kind of visual reminder that there's a lot of work that you need to do when you get home after a day of work and you see a pile of dishes or you see laundry that hasn't been sorted out. That's just a reminder that there's more things that you have to do. And it means that any space that you could be using in your home for more calming, like relaxing activities like yoga or meditation, for example, those spaces are taken up and filled with clutter. And so you're not able to do the things that can help you to relax and reduce that kind of feeling of stress. The most important thing, really, what we're trying to achieve is to create a space that you feel like you can relax in. So like I mentioned at the beginning, if clutter doesn't bother you, if it doesn't stress you out, then it's not really much of a problem. But what you want is to create an area or a space that kind of reflects your state of mind, I suppose. If you want a state of mind that is clear and healthy and stable, then your immediate environment needs to kind of reflect that. So one of the best places to start is to clean up, tidy up your clutter. So what are some of the methods that you can use to do that? How can you combat your clutter? Well, having watched Marie Kondo's show, Tidying Up, I feel like I got loads and loads of really great information from her about some different methods that you can use to help you tidy up. I think that the reason her method of kind of going through all of your things and seeing if they spark joy for you, and you know, if they do, then keeping them and creating space by getting rid of things that don't make you happy so that you have more space for things that do make you happy. For me, that's it's a really nice, almost sort of harm reduction method rather than the pure abstinence of the extreme minimalists who I feel kind of make it seem like if you own anything, then you're a bad person, and that there's no room for any kind of sentimentality, there's no room for art or beauty, everything has to be functional and useful, and if it's not, then you've got to get rid of it, and if you haven't used it in like a week, then it's got to go in the bin. To me, they're the kind of like AA abstinence extreme versions of tidying up, and Marie Kondo's a lot more a kind of harm reduction method that is perhaps a bit more achievable for people who maybe don't just want to throw out all of their stuff and live in an empty box. So I think that checking out that show is a really great place to start. This idea of being able to organize your things more logically, storing things where you keep them. If you don't use them very often, then put them somewhere where you don't have to get to it all the time. Boxes within boxes is like my new favorite thing in the whole world, and I'm obsessed. So that's definitely a great place to start off. Living in a camper van, obviously, I experienced like quite a lot of challenges with space and storage and having too many things because we really don't have a lot of space. But I suppose for the space that we do have quite a large amount of storage space, but it's not all easy to access. And so for us, having that storage space well organized is really, really important. So I've got a few tips for things that I've done in the van to help create a space that doesn't feel cluttered. So I guess the first one, which is more just kind of a lifestyle decision, is to live within our means and not buy loads and loads of things. So to start with, we just don't bring a lot of new stuff into our house. If we do spend money on things, it's often on, going out for dinner or, things like that. It's not often on things. So we don't really bring too much new stuff into the house, but it does happen. There are some really good free shops in Berlin that I've managed to glean a lot of really great stuff from. But I do tend to just sort of take something even if I don't really like it that much, just because it's free, so why not? So the other thing is to purge your stuff often, even if you feel like you're not really that overcluttered or that you don't have too much sort of issues with storage. You do accumulate a lot of stuff just naturally all the time. And so it's a really great idea every so often, especially perhaps this time of year when spring's coming, it feels like it's a really good time to just go through all of your stuff and give it a really good purge. Recycle, donate, give away things that you don't want anymore and that aren't bringing you joy, and see if they might bring somebody else some joy. And I suppose one of the most important things for us is to make sure that everything has a place, especially when you're in a house that moves. You can't just have stuff lying around all of the time. You have to have a place for everything to go. Everything has to have a home. And I found that that is one of the most useful things, to make sure that there's boxes for things, there's storage for everything. Everything has a place. On the other side of that, we also have to be pretty committed to making sure that when you use something, you put it back in the place. So we have become really good at putting things away. And I think that that's another quite important part of tidying up, is once you've done your organizing and you've cleared up your clutter, is then kind of making a commitment to trying to keep it in that way. And one of the best ways that you can do that is to make sure that you're just always putting things away. When you finish using them, you put it back where you found it. And in general, things tend to stay pretty organized most of the time. Another suggestion for how you can clear up your clutter is to tackle it in manageable chunks. So some people might get overwhelmed at the idea of, organizing their entire house all in one go. So if you've watched Tidying Up in the show, Marie Kondo suggests that you tackle things by categories. So she does clothes, books, papers, kitchen things. She does things by categories. You could tackle things room by room. So you could start with the kitchen, you could start with your bedroom, rooms where you would spend the most amount of time, maybe like your living room, and work through your house room by room. Give yourself a day per room, for example. Also, starting small and working your way up. So instead of tackling, say, the loft or a garage that you've been storing things in for like 20 years that you've never tidied up, if that feels too overwhelming, maybe like start with your kitchen drawers and just go from there. Just kind of start with something that feels manageable for you and that's achievable. Once you've done something and you've achieved something, you'll feel much better about it and you might get some motivation to move on to the next thing. Another thing that I think really helps is making things beautiful. So storing things doesn't have to be super boring and plain. I really enjoyed kind of organizing all of our things into plastic tubs so that it looks really nice. It's visually appealing. Finding attractive storage boxes for stuff, or even making or decorating your own, so that when things are stored in them, it makes it feel better to see that they're in these nice boxes rather than just in piles on the floor. Making your home more attractive, with things like art and plants, making space for stuff like that by clearing out other clutter, just means that you're making your home, it's more than just a functional place to just keep your stuff. It's somewhere that makes you feel good when you're there. And that's essentially what you're trying to achieve when you're decluttering your home, is creating a place that makes you feel good when you're there. So, have fun with it. Decorate your storage boxes to make them look cool so that you enjoy having them out and you enjoy having your stuff in them. That's some ways that you can combat kind of your physical clutter in your home. But the other kind of clutter that I was interested in was the sort of the digital clutter and the mental clutter. I think that maybe we're not aware so much how much that kind of clutter can affect our mental state. And I'm thinking particularly with sort of digital clutter, the idea of looking at your email inbox and seeing thousands, I know I have thousands of unread emails, or, scrolling through a Facebook feed filled with posts from people that, you're not that aligned with, that, bring you down when you see them, getting interrupted when you're trying to do something because people keep emailing you and you get notifications coming through and all this kind of stuff. I think that can really affect us, and we definitely would benefit from creating sort of some rules and having some ideas of how we can kind of clean up that sort of clutter. So, perhaps one of the best things you can do is use, for example, use your do not disturb function on your phone when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to tidy up and you don't want to be disturbed, or when you're, just watching a movie and you just want to have time for yourself. If you just want to block out that constant barrage of texts and emails and notifications, then put that do not disturb function on. There are settings so that, certain people can still get through if it's an emergency. It's not like you're cutting out the entire world, but you're creating more space for yourself, which is super important. Do things like close down your internet browsers. If you've got like 50 tabs open for all the different things that you're looking at, close them down. Maybe spend some time cleaning out your email inbox so that when you look at it, it doesn't feel super overwhelming. Maybe spend some time unfollowing some people on social media that don't make you feel awesome when you look at the stuff that they post. Be more selective with what you fill your mind with. So, I think a lot of us are in the habit of checking social media quite early on in the day. A lot of it isn't awesome. A lot of it doesn't spark joy, for me anyway, for sure. And it doesn't make me feel great when I look at it. And so if that's how you start your day, that's not necessarily ideal and isn't going to set you up for having the best day. So maybe have some rules around how long you wait until you start exposing yourself to social media in your day. Maybe having some rules about not having phones or devices during meal times, for example, so that you've got some time where you're physically away from your phone. I think creating space between us and those devices is really important, and it's really hard to do. So you do have to be quite kind of strict with yourself. But I think once you start doing it and you start to realize then how much effect those kinds of things can be having on your mental health and how much better you can feel when they're not having that effect, I think that helps to motivate you to kind of stick to those rules. So, what are some of the benefits of tidying up and decluttering? Why is it that it's a good thing to do? Why is it that I'm talking about it on a podcast about addiction? I think that a lot of the effects that we feel because we live in an overcluttered world are very similar to the effects that we feel because of addiction. So, things like stress and anxiety, the high levels of cortisol, which can lead us to making poor decisions, like choosing unhealthy foods or, not getting enough sleep, all those kinds of things. There's a lot of the similar issues that people with addiction issues struggle with. So tidying up can really help you sort of at least address one cause of what's creating those issues. It's an aspect of self-care, basically. It makes it feel like we're worth taking care of, that we deserve to live in a pleasant space. It can give you a real sense of satisfaction and accomplishment, which I think is really important, especially if we're dealing with addiction problems and we're struggling to feel good about ourselves. Then taking the time to take care of ourselves by, clearing out the clutter in our homes can really make us feel good and better about ourselves. On a more practical level, it makes cleaning easier. It's more efficient. It helps you save time and energy because you're not constantly worrying about where things are. You're not looking for stuff that's lost all of the time. So it can decrease your stress and frustration because of not being able to find anything. It can help your brain to relax because of your increased mental space. And it helps you to concentrate because you're not constantly being distracted by all this visual stimulus that is what it causes that spike in cortisol. And I think maybe one of the most important things is that it can be a catalyst for further change. So, it can create some momentum which you can carry into other areas of your life. If you feel like you have an addiction issue with something, but that just feels like too big of an issue to tackle or to even think about, and you don't know what to do about that, and at the same time you feel like you're drowning in stuff and your house is really untidy and messy, that can be a much safer, kind of easier place to start. You start with a kitchen drawer, for example, and accomplishing that can make you feel better, can then create some momentum to then move you into cleaning up your whole kitchen and then maybe your whole house. And all of these little achievements, all of these sort of goals that you've reached will continue to make you feel better because you'll be reducing that stress and you'll be helping yourself to relax, but also it will make you feel like you can start to tackle other areas of your life that you feel are cluttered as well. So I hope you found this episode useful. I can highly recommend taking some time to at least have a look at your physical space, maybe your digital use, your mental space even, and just see if there's anything there that could be causing you some stress and anxiety, because at the end of the day, any little thing that you can do to help in that area, I feel is important and is a good step forward. So definitely have a watch of maybe a couple of episodes of the Tidying Up show on Netflix. It's enjoyable, even just for Marie Kondo's completely adorable outfits and just like how good it feels to watch people with loads and loads of stuff just get rid of it. That just felt awesome to me when I watched it. And yeah, have a go, see how it makes you feel. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time for the next episode.
If you enjoyed this podcast, head to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more information, check out the Freedom Junkies Facebook group and our blog at www.thefreedomjunkies.co.uk. Thanks to Visceral Manifestations for the design, Ryan Swainson for the theme tune, and all of you for listening.